Your philosophy is everywhere is right for automation. Well, that's the foundation and core value of All Metals.
Our 10-year vision is to be the most automated job shop in America by 2031. So you got to have a vision for people. You got to have the core values that really enforce who you want to be as an entity, and finding the right champions.
The next generation fabricator is going to be folks who are managing systems, not necessarily handling parts. It's probably where things are headed, but again, we're an industry of people. Welcome to the Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts, Caleb Chamberlain from Oshkosh, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrailkill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Hey, Cody Lee of Everyday Technologies here. Before we get back to the episode, I just wanted to say a quick word about what I believe is the industry's leading quoting and collaboration software, Paperless Parts. It helps my shop and hundreds more across North America simplify every step of the quoting process in one secure platform. With patented technology and automated costing logic built around how we work, we're able to turn RFQs quickly and accurately. It's easy to train new team members, and with ERP integration, we avoid rework after winning a job. It gives us better visibility into our pipeline and margins and helps us deliver a fast, more polished experience to our customer. And beyond the software, the Paperless Parts team has been a true partner, responsive, and genuinely invested in our success. Visit paperlessparts.com to see why we rely on it every day.
Thanks again for joining us for Next-Gen Metal Fab. And this time around, we're going to do a one-on-one with Lance Thrailkill of All Metals Fabricating down in Texas, part of our rotating set of co-hosts for this podcast. But Lance just kind of wanted to start the conversation, especially about your company's history with automation, specifically the cultural transformation that happens and the evolution of shop culture that happens when you have implemented an incredible amount of technology over the decades. So why don't you give me a quick history of All Metals for those who aren't familiar, going back to the 1970s.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to. My grandfather acquired All Metals Fabricating in 1978. Before that, their main business, they were making like these Greyhound benches, and then they had a little bit, I think, in the banking industry. My grandfather really rode the wave of the telecom boom here and especially in the DFW area in the 80s and 90s, and the company really grew tremendously. I mean, he bought it for $250,000. That was their sales for the year. And in the first year, he quadrupled the sales while firing the Greyhound bus customer. So he's just pure grit and determination. Man didn't graduate high school, but he knew how to work hard and knew business and knew sheet metal. And so the company grew. My dad joined him later that year, the next year, and helped. They were just a few employees, and so they were really wearing every hat. My grandfather and dad always really had an innovative spirit, really grounded in how to better serve our customers and how to better serve our employees, how to help them make parts most efficiently. Early on, from the punch presses that were, I don't even know how to describe it properly, but the tape reel programs from, just moving from that to actual, CNC and not, and programming off, not with the tape reels, and then really getting at their first laser and really like in 2000. And just always reinvesting. They always had a spirit of reinvesting in the company rather than, taking all the profits out and put it in their pockets, just continuing to invest in the company. And so we really had an innovative spirit. When I joined the team in 2008, we had core values, but we never really knew what they were. And so, I really kind of helped put words around the culture that we have. And one of them was innovative. And so, and that's really twofold. One, looking at ways to uniquely solve customers' problems, taking on opportunities that, with an open mind of how can we solve this need. And then also just innovative in terms of the manufacturing approach. So, they started out in sheet metal. They also added machine shop. They brought in powder coating, bought in a powder coating business and brought that in-house. Just always looking to expand our capabilities in order to serve our customers more and provide more jobs and provide stability to our employees. And so since I've been involved, we really, after 2000, really diversified quite a bit. They started that effort, they being my dad and grandfather, and then I really doubled down on that to where now we don't have more than 20% customer concentration in any industry. We serve virtually every industry, biggest kind of being alternative energy and data centers, kind of 1 and 1A. Also, telecom still a big part of it, about 15 to 20%. Do a decent amount in the medical space. A lot of OEM, so that falls into so many different sectors, from equipment to medical, and even some of the alternative energies for OEMs. And then do a little bit in the aerospace as well, rail car, stuff like that as well. So a little bit of every industry.
All right. Well, thanks for that general background there. Now, just to give folks an idea, you guys have, automated bending and blanking centers. You've got, all the way through to the process. You've got robotics. You've got the full suite. Wondering, first, how to get everybody on the same page to think. You mentioned new kinds of thinking. Kind of, I always like to call it thinking globally instead of locally, where you have folks thinking beyond just one machine versus, hey, how does this flow through the entire shop? So kind of bring me through how you've worked that with all metals, as far as, all right, let's get everybody on the same page from quote to cash, because it's really a continuum.
Yeah, and really that's why I touched on the core values, is because you really have to identify who you are as an organization. And we hire to those core values. So we interview, making people give us examples of these core values, and we grade our employees on these core values. And innovative's a tricky one, especially with people that are high detail oriented and high process oriented, typically aren't very, a lot of times innovation comes with a high risk tolerance. And so, a lot of our people don't necessarily have that. But what everybody can get behind is, how can I do my job easier, more efficiently, as we call it. And so, what can we do? And so, coming in as a third generation owner, you kind of got a big target on your back. I didn't work my way up through the floor like a lot of people had. I'd worked here a couple of summers, but I had my own separate business, doing other things. And so when I came in really from the office and learning the accounting. I came in with the accounting background and learning that from the finances, into the operations. And so really just coming alongside people and just helping understand, and really helping them come up with ideas on how they can do their job more efficiently, whether that is equipment purchases, like big investments, but there's also, there's a lot of things that you can do to, smaller, simpler tools, that are not such a big CapEx investment, even with processes as well, by just coming alongside of people and saying, hey, what if we did this? What if we did that? If we had this, would that help you? And really helping people solve the problem, so you get the buy-in on the floor. So one, having that innovative spirit, and people knowing, like, hey, we're always looking to, you know, continue to improve and get better. And so having people that are thinking through that and know that that's part of who we are and what we're doing. And then couple that with coming alongside them. And like, I look at my job as, CEO. I jokingly say that I'm chief servant of all. Like, my job is to make sure each person is to serve them by making sure they have the tools they need. They're in the right seat, the right person in the right seat with the right tools they need to be successful. And so part of that is, how what can we invest in that will make you more efficient? You can't just expect people to do things better and faster and, all the time, without giving them the tools they need to do their job more efficiently. So really coming at it from that approach of helping them, and getting their buy-in. I think getting the buy-in from the floor is one of the most critical things, because anytime you don't do that, whatever you purchase is typically not going to be successful.
Right, right, right. Kind of bring me through this two things I noticed from what you just said, with especially a lot of folks on the shop floor, especially technically minded folks, brake operators, panel bending operators, welders. Um, Risk averse. You said, the risk tolerance, because they're very process oriented, numbers oriented. They want something exact. And in fact, just wrote a story talking with Gary Connor, a lean consultant we work with a lot, and he goes on and on about, a lot of job shops, don't go down the value stream mapping path, so to speak, because, oh, we can't get a standard cycle time because we have too many different products. We're too high mix. And so they have analysis paralysis. How can we actually overcome that and come at it from a rough estimate, and then we can polish it over time? But part of that resistance he talks about is, again, that risk tolerance. Like, all right, like, so how do you overcome that risk tolerance for those technical folks that are great technicians, but are risk averse?
Yeah, I think, with the risk averse, it's really like people don't like change. If you're very process oriented, typically you're not gonna like change. But if it can help you do your job more efficiently, then typically that's how that you can get buy-in is showing like, hey, you can get more parts out, you can get better efficiency ratings, get them, we equate that to their bonuses and their pay raises, how efficient they are. And so giving them tools, really coming alongside of them of like, hey, uh, and learning opportunities too. So people like to learn generally, even if they are, risk averse or process oriented. A lot of times people like to learn new things. And so, but really it has to come from a heart of wanting to help them be more efficient in their job and the company be more successful as a result of that. And I think as long as you approach it that way and get their buy-in of like, hey, if this will help you get this many more parts out, and your efficiency ratings be higher, then why would they not want to do that? It really has to come alongside of them instead of a top down of like, hey, we're gonna go buy this new machine. Like, I need you to implement it. It's like, no, hey, hey, let's take a look at this together. What we need more parts through this department. What if we got this? And like particularly with bin cell, sometimes you got to reframe the way people think because, the response to traditional manufacturers on regarding a bin cell is, well, we can bin parts that fast too. Well, yeah, but we're talking about throughput right now. We're not necessarily talking about the ROI in terms of you're doing the part faster, like some equipment you buy because they can do it faster and better. Bin cell, yes, it is faster, but you'll have brake operators argue that it's not, and especially when you can, gang bend on a manual brake. So reframing their thinking like, hey, yes, but if we can get that many more parts out, if we can run this thing lights out, then now we're talking about getting more parts out, improving, our throughput and really get your ROI from the lights out production. So just knowing how to come alongside them and help them see the big picture. Also, yeah, casting big vision for people. Like people, need to know the direction that you're going. And so, like our 10-year vision is to be the most automated job shop in America by 2031. And so, people know that's the direction we're going. And if they aren't on board with that direction, then they need to get off the bus. So you got to have a vision for people. You got to have the core values that really enforce who you want to be as an entity and hire and fire to those core values and then get people's buy-in by coming alongside them and helping them do their job more efficiently.
Right, yeah. I think, I had a lot of experience, writing about robotic welding and also robotic and panel bending, automated panel bending. And I always get that comment where it's like, the brake operator watches the robotic arm and goes, "Hey, that's pretty dang slow. It keeps manipulating. It's like we could do that faster." But then the robot arm keeps going and at the same rate all day, and it stacks it perfectly, and the issue then becomes the preventive maintenance, ideally predictive maintenance, because you don't want, when the breakdown happens, everybody goes, "Ah, geez, why did we invest in this? My gosh!" But in a recent column in the magazine, I kind of compare it to the tortoise and the hare, real life, if in real life, so to speak. The kid's tale of tortoise and the hare. Tortoise goes 4 miles an hour, a hare goes 40 miles an hour. So even though if the hare only runs sporadically and gets injured, it's still gonna win, and it's not necessarily, the speed of the process, it's the consistency and just unending throughput, it just keeps going, and I think that's where
Yeah.
people think, yeah, people can muscle through a job, but they can't muscle through a job for 16 hours straight, so that's kind of, the changing mentality. Now, learning something new, how do you introduce a new topic? Say, hey, a brake operator that wants to learn how to run a robotic brake or or panel bender and say, "All right," and as well, learn the process and learn the machine well enough so that they can keep that thing running.
Well, really, it starts with knowing your people. The golden rule you always hear, like treat people the way you want to be treated, and that's great. But the heart behind that's great. But the reality is, you want to be treated differently than I want to be treated, and what motivates you is different than what motivates me. So really knowing who your people, like what motivates your people. Some people really enjoy learning, and that fuels them. And so knowing who those people are so that they can be your champions of implementation. And that's key. So it really started like, knowing how your people are wired. Like we have a personality survey that I know how every person in our organization is wired, what their risk threshold is, whether they're extroverted or introverted, if they're, process oriented or if they're detail oriented. Which, I always jokingly say I should be the only non-detail oriented person in our organization. Yeah, knowing how people are wired and really playing to that and finding the right champions. And one thing that I've done that I found successful and also present certain challenges as well, is, whenever we're going to get new equipment, I go to the lead of that department, which we've already identified as somebody that is, innovative and does want to continue to learn. And I go to them. I'm like, hey, we need a new bin cell. Let's go pick one out. So they're getting to go, fly out to Trump and Amada and, go, tour these facilities and get a really cool life experience. And I just tell them, I'm like, which one do you want? Which one do you think would be best? And, that feels like a huge weighty decision for, mid-managed, leader, especially you're talking lasers, $1 to $2 million machines. But I just tell them, I'm like, hey, if anything doesn't go well, like I'm your fall guy and it'll be my fault. But if it goes great, you get all the credit. And so really, like empowering them to make the decision. Now that does present challenges. Like right now we're looking at a automated pallet changer 5-axis mill. And so the guy's one on the floor is different than the one I think we should get. And so, we're talking through that now, but it's really just it requires more communication. And I just, I'm inviting them into the bigger picture of, hey, we've got a relationship with this other vendor that we've trusted and that has supported us. And so we're introducing a new level of risk by going a different direction. And, that could work out great. But the fact that you like the ergonomics aspect of one feature in that machine better than the other machine, is that enough to justify us going and trying a total new vendor who we have no history with? And if we ask their references, they're going to give us their best ones. And so of course they're going to say the machine is up all the time. And when it's not, they're there within 24 hours. And so it definitely does present challenges. And like I'm trying to get us to be on board with the cobot right now and buy and implement a cobot. And that, that's going very slow. Yeah, because welders, it just takes time and they're busy with production. And whereas I'm like, let's just go buy one. But I've learned that mistake before. I went and bought a laser welder after FabTech 4 years ago or whatever when they first got it, and nobody used it because you got to have a champion behind it before you got to get the buy-in. You can't. And to me, fortunately, that was only a $15,000 to $20,000 learning experience, but which is why I greenlit it without getting buy-in. I went against my own rule. But you know Yeah, glad it wasn't a laser or something like
Yeah, that would have been quite interesting. Another shop I talked to that for another story that I remember him saying, we were walking by, they had punch laser combos and they had never gone into punch laser combo before. It was always just a laser only shop, and they were very much a proponent of laser because they got out of punching in the 1980s, so they said, or 1990s. The guy talked to the supervisor and he said, okay, guess what? This laser punch combo has no slats. That means I don't have to clean the slats. That means that we are always up if we can maintain this dang machine. And for these certain processes, he knew certain processes. Say, listen, I could learn to run this and there was enough support from the vendor, so it worked out. So, and vendor support is important, as we all know. So, but he learned from the vendor how to run that punch machine, which is really a punch machine with an added laser. But it just kind of expanded these. Oh yeah, guess what? Friday afternoons we always clean the slats, and here we don't have to clean. There's no freaking slats to clean, and we have this automated system that got got crashed because some laser cut got welded to the slats. Why? Because he didn't clean the slats frequently enough, and and also that the programming didn't pay attention to the nest didn't pay attention to what the slat orientation. So you had a lot of laser cuts going on along right on top of slats. Those kind of minute details to get people to buy in and to have that collaboration is great. Now with the cobots, like, all right, so what's the resistance? There's not much use for it because I can weld and so can the cobot. So what's the point?
They're busy with production and carving out the time to go do the research, go tour other facilities, learn the application. That's just, but I think that's necessary to get that level of buy-in. And so while I think they see the potential, but they're more risk averse and they're more detail oriented, so they're going to want to make sure they know everything about it before they go pull the trigger on something. And so it's just taking more time than I would have liked, but we're getting there. We've also been looking at a cobot for automated grinding. It's been something we're looking into. So yeah, just to give everybody a little bit of context. So we've got a 2-tower fully automated laser cutting machine. We've got a fully automated load unload punching. We've got fully automated load unload laser punch combo. We've got an automated load, manual offload panel bender, and we've got a automated bend cell as well. And then we have a robotic welder, which is still manual load and unload, no automation there, other than the robotic welding. And then on the machine shop, we've got a bar feeder, but no real automation there. So we're looking to implement more automation and welding and grind.
You mentioned the cobot automation, and one thing I see that, and this is just a guess on my part, because when I was covering robotic teach pending classes at a Alabama training center years ago, and I noticed the way that they taught the teach pendant on the robotic welder, the traditional robotic welder. It's a very detailed process. It's a very involved process. It takes time, and so which. Obviously, that's why everybody loves the cobots and the simplified programming. To getting back to human nature, the detail-oriented aspect of it all, it's very complex, and it's almost soothing, and it's almost makes them trust people trust the process because it's very complex, very detailed. I can tweak it here and there, and that's exactly what I need to tell it to do. And the robot does exactly what I tell it to do, and I have to tell it exactly what to do. And that makes me feel good as a welder. Then you go to the simplified programming for cobots and go, are you sure this is going to work? Because you just choose this and it goes, and you go beyond that where now we've got certain robots that are autonomous, where they look at a piece, they compare it to the CAD drawing, and it's like, all right, that's the weld data, this is the weld size, boom, go. It's probably where things are headed. But again, we're an industry of people. It's one of those things where it's like, all right, can we trust this to make sure that it is actually doing what it's supposed to do?
That's interesting. And I'm curious how that would work on the software side, because modeling welds is not something really people do, or if they do, they don't do it right typically. But so that's interesting. I think that'll take some time to catch some traction, but sounds very, very attractive. With the cobots, yeah, I feel you. But I think that, with a robotic welder, and they've made a lot of headway in making the programming more user friendly. But yeah, just anytime something's going to take a lot of time to program and set up and fixture, your people on the floor are going to be thinking, I can just go do this, knock this out faster myself. Some of that's short-sighted, the way they think. They're not thinking about, well, once I've got it saved, I can do it that way every time. But with a robotic welder, oftentimes, I mean, it's tough to justify, putting it on the robot and investing, all the fixturing time and programming time, and typically, all welders will say you got to tack it up first. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but that's oftentimes the mindset of many welders. But with the Cobot, just being able to manually do that and work in with it, in real time, I think it's a no brainer. And the people that are using them love them and swear by them and are buying more and more of them. And so we'll be getting one. It's just a matter of when, because I want to get that buy-in, and that's how I have no doubt that it'll work and be great. But I'm not going to pull the trigger till my team's bought in, and that's a discipline that I've established because I've learned that lesson. That it is necessary. So you've really got, even if it's little small investments, with an automated box taping machine that we have, or a automated pallet wrapping machine that we have, you got to get the buy-in from the people. Otherwise, they're just not going to use it. Even if it's just $5,000, that's still a lot of money, and takes up floor space if you're not going to use it. So getting these people bought in is the key, no matter how big or small the investment is.
Your philosophy is everywhere is right for automation because you want to be, and that's the deal. That's the business model. That's the foundation and core value of All Metals. But where do you identify the constraint and the next constraint? In other words, all right, you don't want to, all right, we've got a blanking cell that's great, but boy, is it old? Do we need to update it? But then we're just going to feed a bottleneck and constraint downstream.
Yes, I mean, first, anytime you've got a throughput issue, capacity issue, that triggers a conversation for bringing in new equipment, automated or not. That's kind of what is initial, the initial driver. So we've got, to your point, Tim, our big picture vision. So we know this is where we're going to go, and so how do we build the 1 and 3 year plans to make sure we're moving towards that 10-year plan? With the 5-axis mill with the pallet changer, like, we don't need that, but I want it, and it matches our vision, and we could get more work. We have enough work for it probably, but it's not a need, it's more of a want. So it fits, our big picture vision, but not an immediate need. Um, Granted, we do have somewhat of a need there, but way I like to describe it. So a lot of times the capacity or will drive that initial need and conversation, and then really the slam dunk of an investment is whenever you can introduce a new capability. Whenever you can address a capacity issue and introduce a new capability, and then also kind of the third thing is when you can do it more efficiently, the new technology is more efficient. And so that's kind of the trifecta. It's like we have a capacity issue. The new machine will allow us to do more and more, in the same amount of time that we're doing it. That would be more of a replacement than an add, but still, nonetheless, it's true of both situations. And then that third factor is, does it add a new capability? So, for example, for us, the panel bender, that was a new capability that we had, and so when you can address, and then also we could offload some of our brake department work to the panel bender. And so things that we're doing on a traditional brake press, now we can do on the panel bender, do it more efficiently. And so we're gaining capability. We're also addressing a capacity issue, and it also bends faster than a traditional brake press. So that's what I call the trifecta right there. It's just a slam dunk opportunity. And so that's really the way I think about it. When you can address capacity usually drives the conversation, along with big picture vision. And then if you can improve your efficiency in that department and that process. And then, lastly, if you can add a new capability, then that really is a slam dunk.
Yeah, talking about switching from the brake to the panel bender. The best examples of that was a shop tour I did years ago. This was an FMA technology summit, I think, or fabricator technology summit, where we're at a shop where the guy held up this little tiny bracket and he says, "This is a panel bending part. How can this possibly be a panel bending part? It was 2 inches. What the heck? What are you talking about?" And he said, "All right, guys, look at this." And then he went over to the long gang tabbed sheet. And it says, "All right, guess what? We tabbed this all together because they had a punch laser combo feeding it, and we tabbed this all together, and we started out off micro tabbing it, so we had to break it off and individually break it off and grind it, And then eventually they got the tool where they could actually have the snap apart tooling where it actually was a clean edge on the snap. They could actually say, all right, this is clean. This is, you can snap it apart and you can avoid the knocking off the tab. And so they went through that argument back and forth because the brake operator's like, what are you talking about? We got to bend this and we got to have somebody break it apart when we could just do it on the brake. And he was going, yes, but we are dedicating a very talented brake operator for all day, every day, sitting at a little brake, bending these little tabs. And that's great. We've got the ergonomic brake to do it. That's why they do it, and it's a fast ram. That's why we have them. But man, oh boy, that guy was freaking bored out of his mind doing all that. And so now they transferred it to the panel bender in a creative fashion, and the technology allowed them to do that. Where they said, "Hey, we can do 20 at a time. Bam, done." Break it apart. Yeah, it's a manual breakout process. So that's that's the last shred of manual processing. But but they all got together and say, hey, this is the best way to flow these parts down. And the time studies justified it. Now I caught up with them and they no longer do that, but that's because they looked at the big picture and the sales guy at the front end said, listen, we have orders for thousands and thousands of these every month or say or whatever. Couldn't we drip these to you like 15, 20, 30 at a time? And so for the last 3 years, they were able to do that and say, listen, we can reduce your inventory. And that helps us on our end because that means we don't have to process these huge batches and we can make it flow down. And as you mentioned, right, even automated bending, you can actually do pretty high mix and do
Mhm.
kit-based flow. And that was even a bigger win.
Yeah, so that's customer driven. So, it's like what helps the customer, serves the customer, and then it works better for you too. So that's great.
Yeah, it's the whole supply chain because the only reason they historically wanted that many was just security. They wanted the inventory, and shops were happy to produce it because they wanted the cash. But
Mm,
they were realizing, well, wait a minute, if we can drip feed to them, then we can actually fit in more capacity for other customers. That was the
yeah,
key, is so that,
interesting.
hey, so they could actually increase their overall throughput because they are not dealing with these huge piles of WIP because it would be inefficient to well, they still split the order, but it was just such a big lumbering job that among the small tail of other jobs in the shop, and that was an interesting case of just getting sales and the floor all on the same page. And I'm kind of curious how you guys do that as far as having the office, the engineers, and the operators all on the same page, making sure that everything's flowing from quote to cash.
Yeah, man, what a great challenge for every shop. Something that we've found super helpful is we implemented something called EOS, which is Entrepreneur Operating System, and what it is essentially is just helping companies um, crystallize their vision and their core values, and then communicate their meeting rhythms, and so and then having communication channels through those meeting rhythms, and so what that, looks like is, we have our company quarterlies where the leadership team meets and establishes our goals. We call them rocks for the quarter, and that help move us towards our 1 year, 3 year, and 10 year goals. And then the each team, the sales team has theirs meetings, and then the department leads have their meetings as well. And so, and then each department has their meetings, weekly meetings, and each one's kind of in different rhythms depending on what the need is. But through that, issues will bubble up from the floor. And they're looking at like, hey, what works, what doesn't work. What can we do better? How do we improve our machine utilization, our efficiency, yada yada. And so they'll flow that communication up through our system that we use, communication system, and so they'll pop up issues through these channels and work it way up to the whether it makes it to the leadership team or whether the department leads solve it, and that really helps. And our sales team sits in. Our sales team leader sits in on the department lead meetings pretty regularly as well, just to have a presence there. They'll oftentimes the floor's got gripes about oh, well, this person didn't put enough time, or this person didn't get, my hardware here in time, whatever. And so just having that, presence there in those meetings helps, but really having those ideas. So it starts with, the whole company casting this vision. Here's where we're going. Here's our goals for each quarter. So then every person in the organization knows what leadership's team's goals are for that year and that quarter. And I do a state of the union kind of every 6 weeks, just updating them on where we're at with our goals, and keeping everybody informed, and then having regular meeting cadences to help feed that information back up to those channels to help solve problems. That's really what those meetings are about. It's all about solving problems. We call it IDS: identify the problem and solve it. And so identify, discuss, and solve. And so that's how it's worked really, really well for us. I'd say it's been a game changer. We actually just won DFW top places to work for the most competitive field. And several years ago, when we first started taking the surveys, we had really good results. We won like national manufacturing industry, benchmark or whatever, but we were still pretty far off from making the cut for the top places to work. And I thought at the time, I was like, is it even possible for a blue collar environment to win? Because I mean, how in tune can these people be with these different things going on in the company? I mean, how much can you expect from them? And to know how to answer these questions. And but I attribute it to the communication chains of EOS, for helping us, the people, feel heard. And when you open up that can, or actually our lowest score was the year after we started these communication channels, because you're going to get a lot of feedback, and they want to see everything solved right away. And when you're an organization of 75 people with processes that have been established for 20 years, and it's tough to, and you got ISO, you can't just change everything on the fly. You've got your processes. And so initially, we had a dip in scores because the more feedback they got, they're like, wait, we're not seeing the results. But then having 2 years later to go ahead and win was remarkable. And like I said, I attribute that to making the people feel heard, and acting on the issues they bring up.
I went to a paperless parts conference earlier this year. There was a company there, and software companies that were, looking to collaborate to streamline communication, but also automate the audits. So in other words, you prep for an audit, you click something, it goes, okay, I'm ready. And because it automates the gathering of information, all that tedious paperwork of audits and what we all work on, and the process development. And it also makes sure that your processes are in place. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is for all this, as far as building culture, is that when you have processes in place and communication channels in place and everybody's on the same vision. I've been in shops where you got people at conferences on their phones. Oh, where's this? Where's this? It's always chasing because something went wrong, and
Yep.
there's the processes are not in place, and so it's very hard to enjoy life. It's not a very nice career, and you certainly would have been one of the best places to work in the DFW area, right? So that wouldn't have worked. But because you've got the processes in place, the communication channels in place, the technology in place, and tools in place to actually do the mission, then you made it work. And you were able to go to Europe last week, I understand, right? How was Europe? Where'd you go?
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I was 3 weeks for the longest I've ever been gone. We did Paris, Switzerland, and Italy. For We were going for a wedding, but we made trip on the front end and the back end of it with my whole family. So it's great.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And yeah, when you put the right people in place and you empower people, empower people to carry out the vision. That's the difference, right? Like, I couldn't do that if I didn't have the great team running the vision. And last summer, actually, when I was out for most of July, we had our record month in 20 or in the last 70 years. And so, you love seeing that when you got a good team in place and give them a vision, they can run with it.
Was that that's a little it's like, I leave, and boy, they have the best no boy, what's going on?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Our best months ever. So maybe I should just go to town more. Uh,
That's right, that's right. What's the game plan the next 3 to 5 years, your vision as far as, all right, I know to become the most automated by 2030. Give me the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, something I'm wrestling with right now. We've never tried to grow, so our model's always been be excellent and faithful with the opportunities in front of you, and you'll grow as you need to grow. And in manufacturing, you never really want to experience rapid growth, anyways, because of just natural constraints and whatnot. In order to get to where we want to go, and the capex and investments that are required to be made to go there, do we need to intentionally grow? And really try to grow, which we've never done before. And we've been blessed and we've grown significantly. But that's something I'm wrestling with right now, and really kind of an aha moment of like, you know, just kind of spurred on by the Fab 40 list. I'm like, I want to be on that list, but I can't unless I grow. But then that got me really thinking of like, man, do we need to grow to get to where we want to go? And so our big focus is going to be growing our machine shop, because, we're about 90% sheet metal, 10% machining. And there's no reason why we can't, do just as much in machining. And that doesn't require a lot of space either. Smaller parts, more expensive parts. And so that's something we're going to be really focused on in the next couple of years, is growing our machine shop. And that's why we're looking at making such a big investment, while we're predominantly sheet metal, to make a $650,000 investment in a, pallet changing 5-axis mill seems a little crazy, but I just think there's so much opportunity there, and just educating our customer base of what all we can do, being a complete solutions provider, and being expert machinists and things like that. So, but yeah, that's something that we're dealing with right now. And really, I think, in the coming years, that me and you have talked about the ERP, and going paperless. That's going to be a huge undertaking for us. We're working with some companies, talking to some companies, and helping, looks like, co-develop some software that's pretty exciting. Given the data migration and the lift that requires currently, which is mind blowing, that in this 2025, it's still going to be that big of a deal. I think we've got a little bit of time to figure that out, and make sure that's seamless, because we've got 25 years of data that we don't want to lose. And then also just figuring out how to implement AI and what that looks like in the manufacturing space. I'm looking to install a RAG LLM on our server to start analyzing our ERP system and extracting data, and looking to build some automation off of that as well, for things that manual tasks that we do. That's something that's pretty high focus for us. But then, yeah, I think just, on that front, just to the audience, it's like, there's lots of ways to automate, like little simple things that you can do. I'd first look at like utilizing your ERP system to the fullest of what you have, and there's typically a lot built in your ERP system that you're not utilizing. And what triggered that thought was you mentioning the automating of the auditing paperwork and compiling all that stuff. Like, look for stuff like that. It doesn't have to be a big $2 million, automated laser, the tower and all that stuff. It can be little things. It can be processes. It can be quoting through, automated quoting, and automating your invoicing, automating your, reporting. So, we get reports automatically sent to us if a job's tracking late, things like that. Utilizing which tools you already have, and then what tools can be bolted on to what you already have to automate, front and back office work as well. It doesn't just have to be the manufacturing floor.
Right. I think that's what the next generation fabricator is going to be, is folks who are managing systems, not necessarily handling parts and handling jobs. And so that, you still have that manual technician in certain areas, but production work is probably going to be automated head to tail, so to speak. So, well, Lance, this has been great. Next time we get together, we'll have the full panel back together. Again, thanks so much for tuning in for Next-Gen Metal Fab, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
That really is a slam dunk.